Thank you. Thanks very much, and thanks to the organisers for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'll be speaking about harmonisation efforts in research integrity in Asia as well as Asia Pacific, and focusing on small research integrity networks and their impacts, really from an institutional perspective. Research is a human endeavour. The principles of research integrity are translated into practice through complex processes. It depends on who you are, where you're from, your discipline, your skills, and how you work with other researchers. There are lots of people in Asia. There's lots of different cultures in Asia, and so there are very, very diverse research cultures that exist across Asia. Some that are very, very well established and have their own scholarly traditions, and some that are new and emerging. The Asia-Pacific research cultures add diversity to this system, and it also adds a neat rationale for a white Australian male to come to speak to you today about Asia. However, research is global. So let's do a quick quiz. Please consider the following harmonised pieces of research from Asia and Asia-Pacific. Can you spot them? Which of the following published X-ray crystallography datasets are reported by researchers based in Asia and the Asia-Pacific? No, okay, I won't get responses. That's okay, fine. These ones, and yet these look harmonised, and yet we know research data are highly diverse, and some datasets are ephemera and complex and will not look like this at all. So they're not harmonised. Here's another question. Which of the following authorship contribution statements for articles recently published in the Open Access Journal PLOS One are reported by researchers based in Asia and the Asia Pacific? These statements look harmonised. Which ones? Can't read them? You've got to come to the front. These ones here, but not that one. That one's from the Netherlands. But this authorship contribution statements represent some harmonisation around authorship, but we also know that authorship is not harmonised in lots of different senses. Authorship matters is highly discipline dependent and can look quite different. Some disciplines don't have things such as 7 co-first authors. Which of the following examples of scholarly writing are by researchers based in Asia and Asia Pacific? Just 2 of them. They look similar, they look harmonised. One's about the Cold War in Asia, one's about Chinese feminist cinema. Malaysia and the USA. But we actually also know and we acknowledge that not every scholarly language or writing is in English, and this is diversity. Which of the following journals are based in Asia and the Asia Pacific support the ARRIVE guidelines as a way of standardisation, harmonising research for better reporting and experimentation with animals? That's right, all of the above. But we know that these initiatives, such as the ARRIVE guidelines, are showing increasing but low uptake in research. And so there is diversity there. It's not quite harmonised. So in response to reasonable expectations of the research community, there is already a level of harmonisation to research from Asia and Asia Pacific so that it fulfills the principles of research integrity, such as transparency and accountability. However, other components of conducting and reporting research are not harmonised. So what other research things should we harmonise? And if we do, what do we expect it to deliver? This is a really important question. Actually, stepping back a bit, for research integrity initiatives, what do we actually mean when we say harmonisation? Harmonisation can mean very positive things. It can represent unity and togetherness, adding robustness to a system, standardisation and efficiency gains. And I think for research integrity, that means an increase in the capacity or fitness of research to fulfil the principles of research integrity. Harmonisation can also mean sameness and stasis. It adds constraint, and it actually results in a loss or reduction of diversity, and harmonisation things can be incompatible with research. So we should consider what might be lost or impacted by harmonisation. When we talk about Asia and Asia Pacific, things are very different and complex across the system, and this diversity presumably is very important. We recognise that. What are the costs as compared to the benefits? So from an institutional perspective, we're looking at now, I guess, harmonisation of research at institutions. The research process can be simplified down to ideas and then iterative steps across the process that can be themselves diverse, that sometimes interconnect or terminate, or look unrelated and yet are. Research can also occur through paradigm shifts that dramatically change our research and its progress. This diversity in the ways of doing research is also added to this diversity is the variability in how research is conducted. So research can be conducted responsibly, but also in terms of research integrity, there are questionable research practices, and there are conducts or things that breach the principles of research integrity. So research integrity initiatives, particularly within institutions, or really overall, I guess, aim to increase the capacity or the fitness of these individual things sometimes, or broad aspects of the system, to fulfill the principles of research integrity. These initiatives of harmonisation can target things such as end products, such as journal articles or other things. But institutions have a really critical role here, because institutions is where research is done. So let's look at a pretty small system for research, and research where there's only a handful really of institutions and what institutions have been doing there. Let's have a look at Australia. So institutions in Australia have had a national code for quite a while, 2007. We've had a look at how harmonised the national codes are and how they describe the principles of research integrity, and only a handful of them actually use the national code. All the others have different codes. And similarly, none of the ones that we've looked at actually reference the Singapore Statement. There's also real diversity in education and training approaches in institutions. The National Code also provides us with one definition of research misconduct in Australia. So we've done an assessment of how this is described at institutions across Australia. Interestingly, when we looked at this, a subset of universities didn't make their definition of research misconduct available to the public for assessment. In Australia, there are 42 different definitions of research misconduct. There's no standard definition. There's one that matches the Australian code, the national code verbatim, and then there are many, many others. 6 make novel distinctions between research misconduct and something called serious research misconduct, and they're linked to employment agreement or employment law legislation that exists within universities. In fact, some institutions have individually more than one definition of research misconduct in Australia. So there isn't an agreed definition of research misconduct in Australia, and even sometimes even within an institution. So institutional responses, we're making a hypothesis here, to research integrity across Asia and Asia Pacific appears highly diverse, or will be. So what can institutions do? How do we get our act together? How do we get our act together about this? How can we, through working together, increase the fitness of the things that we're trying to improve for research integrity? Well, small research integrity networks enable the sharing of ideas and approaches, and they foster collaboration. They're a mechanism by which new selective pressures can be introduced at institutions to increase the fitness of research, to better fulfill the principles of research integrity. The new selective pressures may be initiatives that result in the harmonisation of research and the management of it at institutions. However, this might not be appropriate or even possible given the local ecologies present at institutions. The local ecosystem and the focus of a network are very important. I've got some examples I'd like to share with you. Here's an example, sorry, it's from sort of, if you said the Pacific Rim, it's from the US, but this is an example of a small research integrity network, the Association of Research Integrity Officers in the USA. The US has a long recent history of addressing research misconduct, and this association collects together the right representatives from institutions from across in the US to come together and are increasingly interacting with government regulators. This group appears to have a focus on research misconduct and the application of a legal framework. While this adds high precision to the processes or the ways that you address research misconduct within this jurisdiction, and there are positive benefits of that, this focus potentially limits the overall positive impact that the network could provide to the system. I've represented it there in the blue. A new and much, much smaller network is one that's looking at data management and education about data management and records for an audience of researchers within Australia and Australian institutions called Research Integrity Advisors. This network is built up of specialists in data, university representatives, government-based funding agencies which have come on board, which is fantastic, and a research management society within Australia and Australasia. It aims to build national capacity to address research integrity issues in a responsible management of research data via education and training. Data, because data is the gold of research and highly critically important, the outcomes of this network might have potentially broad impacts for research conducted and reported from Australia. In Asia, there's a network, a research integrity network, built as the Centre for Research Ethics Information in Korea. This is built up of institutions and governments and different groups with keen interest and critical roles and responsibilities in research integrity and ethics in Korea. It provides information, guidelines, education, and training. It's a broad discussion that's provided by this centre. There is, interestingly, it's technologically advanced, or it certainly appears to be. It provides online advice and counselling, a counselling centre for researchers with concerns. There's even an app, and the website won an award. It's very, very cool. This network has potentially broad positive impacts for all researchers, not just Korean researchers. A brand new one, and one that's emerging and that's highly relevant to Asia and Asia Pacific and research integrity across it, is this one, APRI. APRI was initiated by the US Office of Research Integrity. And although we're talking about selection, ecologies, and evolution, by intelligent design, this network has rapidly evolved from being a mechanism to build capacity in the reporting of research misconduct cases from Asia to being a place for institutions to share and collaborate together to build an understanding of differences and similarities, and really to bring lots of different voices together to create new research integrity. This is a fantastic opportunity for us, and actually within Asia Pacific and Asia, it's actually hopefully a huge, will derive benefits that are reflective of not only local scholarly traditions across Asia, but also research more broadly. So what are some of the things that we might look at to make an impact in institutions via an APRI at institutions across Asia and the Asia Pacific? I mean, didn't we already do this? If we're basing around policies and discussions and designing of education and training and addressing when things go wrong at institutions, the Singapore Statement provides us an amazing start for this. One that provides us with the principles of research integrity that have broad applicability. At APRI, it will be interesting to see the discussion around this, around the values, around how they're described, around the responsibilities that are derived from this, and the other things that can come out of the Singapore Statement during its application across Asia and Asia Pacific. And that might mean very sensitive conversations that are around, well, integrity isn't the word we should be using. It should be research ethics, or there are other aspects of terms such as good stewardship, for which, as an Australian, I had struggled with. Well, also because I'm not from the Middle Ages, but good stewardship is an important term. It takes time for us to derive what that means. Ultimately, what we really want is diverse voices singing in harmony, and this can happen. Asia and Asia Pacific is a perfect place for this. This is a Swedish movie. It's not very representative, but this would imagine lots of diversity in people singing. But us singing together across Asia and Asia Pacific for research integrity and increasing the fitness. Now, what might happen is that the Singapore Statement, for example, will be taken and it will go to places across Asia and it will change. It will adapt. because it has to for the local systems and the local ecologies. That's okay. The benefits for increased fitness of research for research integrity, that's the main outcome, and that will be achieved. So I'd like to finish with acknowledgements. My co-author, Paul Taylor from RMIT University, and my colleagues from the University of Melbourne, and dank je wel. Thank you.
Any questions for Dan?
Hi, Dan.
Hey.
Couldn't help myself, especially when you mentioned ARIO. So I'm Deborah Shallow-Demers from Memorial Sloan Kettering, but my other hats, I happen to be on the board of the newly formed ARIO. We are actually trying to become, similar to WCRI, we are trying to become a real organization and give us some foundation. I don't know if my colleagues are in the room, Lauren and Craig. But what I wanted to say is something that resonates with me. I think it's about starting conversations. So regardless of what group you align with, and yes, ARIO, I think, began with this group of people who are tagged by profession as research integrity officers. In the US, that's a very specific role with specific duties. People like me, whose job is RCR director and supporting the RIO, have a little bit of a further reach with research integrity. We have some other touch points. And there are lots of other organizations in the United States. Society of Research Administrators, that I'm very involved with, also has a research integrity track. And we have lots of discussions about integrity and compliance. And that covers lots of other folks. My poster inside is about a conference we're doing funded by the Office of Research Integrity in June that's bringing research administrators, post-award, pre-award, technology development people, to have this conversation with them. What role do they play in research integrity? So again, it's about building capacity. So regardless of your network or your niche, just coming to this conference and going home and talking to the person that shares the cubicle next to you builds that capacity, because ultimately, as potential patients, research subjects, people in the universe, it's all of our responsibility, right? So whatever pocket of capacity we can build, we need to do that. That's on all of us.
Great.
I got off my soapbox, no
Thanks.
question. But you
Thanks for your
mentioned us.
American question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. No. No, that's great. Look, I completely agree with you. It's about talking, and what an interesting discourse we will have from being from Asia Pacific and being involved in APRI, with the discourse and understanding how we talk to with each other and how we communicate ideas from East and West, which is sometimes, well, we're informed by, different is the wrong word, but different, or perhaps different philosophies. There you go. It's a very interesting question. I think APRI will be an interesting place for this to happen, and the outcomes of that conversation from such different perspectives, even though it's all research, could have huge positive benefits for research integrity. I do think, though, that research integrity officers in the US should be renamed research misconduct officers, but that's just...
So that's a really interesting question. So and I think even in some of the sessions I've attended here, so that whole idea of negative connotation versus positive connotation.
Yep. Yeah.
If I call up somebody and say, this is your research misconduct officer calling, what do you think they're going to do? Right? They're going to run out the door. So we're trying to put a positive spin on this. I'm not really here to punish. I'm trying to enable the research.
Yep.
I'm trying to keep the money flowing. I'm trying to stay out of jail. But I don't want to go to the bad side, right? I want to use the good force, before the bad force, right? So yes, sometimes it's semantics, but again, it's knowing your audience. How are they best going to hear you, right? Because we want to spread the good word. We want to get everybody doing the right thing. How do I need to reach you? And in different groups, in different parts of the world, that conversation probably is different, because we do have a different cultural outlook on how we view those kinds of concepts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If I can, I'd like
I promise I won't get up again.
I'd like to just explore that issue from a slightly different perspective. I know Australia has taken a different approach to its codes, definitions, and so on. And the US, as you say, has the misconduct approach, which whatever spin you put on it, it's still a misconduct approach. Throughout Asia, as they've built capacity, many have looked to the US for guidance, and some have looked to Australia. How, as you seek to harmonize through the area, how are you grappling with that issue of the different models?
Yeah, the different models are very interesting. When we talk about research, though, and when we talk about research integrity, or whatever we might call it, within the context of the Singapore Statement, there is nodding, there is agreement around shared values that translate well into research in these systems. Either approaches are fine. If you're looking to increase accountability, I mean, arguably you would want to take that US track in a way, to be able for institutions to know clearly how they're going to address breaches of research integrity. I think Australians have looked a bit more to Canada, and I think, according to the consultation draft of our new code that will hopefully be coming out soon, is around that. What are the fundamental principles for Australian research and research integrity? What are the responsibilities for researchers and institutions that derive from that? And then, yeah, what do we do with breaches? Asia is very big, though, so there'll be complexity there, and there'll be new events, and there might be some really new solutions to this.
Good. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.